Welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Foreign Minister for Benin Republic, Olusegun Bakare, says some 200 West African soldiers, mainly from Nigeria and Côte d'Ivoire, have arrived in his country to support the government following the failed coup attempt on Sunday. It is the first time officials have said how many foreign soldiers were deployed to the country, although it is not clear if some have been withdrawn since Sunday. Mr. Bakare said on Thursday that some of the regional troops sent to help that remained in the country as part of the sweep and cleanup operation. In the meantime, there is an active manhunt for the remaining soldiers who participated in the coup, as well as a leader who is said to be taking refuge in Togo. The soldiers said their grouse with the Talon government was his handling of the continuing deterioration of the security situation in Benin Republic. The back and forth continues between the DRC and Rwanda over the violation of a peace deal brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump. On Thursday, Communications Minister for the DRC, Patrick Muyaya, again accused Rwanda of undermining the peace process following the takeover of the strategic South Kivu city of Uvira by M23 rebels. He said at a press conference, this military escalation, contrary to the spirit and purpose of the Washington Agreement, dramatically worsens an already critical humanitarian situation, resulting in loss of life, mass displacement, destruction of infrastructure, collective trauma, and increased vulnerability for an already fragile population. Rwanda's foreign ministry denies the country's involvement in the recent M23 offensive of Uvira, backlashing the blame for the conflict's escalation onto the DRC. Kigali continues to strongly deny M23 backing, instead shifting the focus to Burundian troops and alleging that they are responsible for shelling civilians. The government spokesperson assured that the DRC remains committed to the Washington peace framework. However, the president of the republic appealed to defense and security forces to maintain the required level of alert to confront the latest aggression. Muyaya adds that the FARDC Chief of Staff briefed the government on deployments in multiple operational areas and the measures taken to secure security under attack. Under the Trump-Washington Accords for Peace and Prosperity, the DRC and Rwanda agreed to an immediate end to hostilities in the eastern Congo and promised not to back armed groups. The United States Congress has advanced a bill that seeks to revive the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which expired on September 30 this year. The AGOA Extension Act was introduced by Jason Smith, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives who proposed a 3-year renewal until December 31st of 2028. On Wednesday, the U.S. House Committee on Ways and Means passed the Extension Act by a vote of 37-3, showing bipartisan support before full House consideration. A committee statement described the trade initiative as the cornerstone of economic relations between the U.S. and sub-Saharan African nations. Lawmakers aim to include the bill in a continuing resolution for federal funding passed January 2026 amid intensified lobbying by African governments and U.S. industry groups. We'll return to this story in a minute, where the Kenyan President William Ruto says climate change is no longer an abstract debate, but a daily experience affecting millions across Africa. He was given this address at the 17th United Nations Environment Assembly in Nairobi on Thursday. He highlighted that increasing climate disasters such as droughts, floods, and severe storms threaten food and water security. Stating just days ago, Kenya was compelled to declare a national drought emergency in 20 counties, leaving our citizens at risk of severe hunger and water scarcity. The Kenyan president also noted that artificial intelligence, digital technologies, and electrification are reshaping production, work, and trade.
Extreme weather. Just days ago, Kenya was compelled to declare a national drought emergency in 20 counties, leaving our citizens at risk of severe hunger and water scarcity. and as delayed rains and climate stress devastate crops and livestock. Across our continent, from failed harvests to destructive floods, from intensifying storms to conflict worsened by resource scarcity, Africans are paying the price for a crisis they did not create. These extremes are becoming the new global normal. One of the most visible symptoms of the triple crisis is plastic pollution. Plastics now contaminate our soils, our rivers, our oceans, the food we eat, and even our bodies. This threat demands an ambitious and effective international treaty. Kenya remains fully committed to an agreement that addresses plastics across their full life cycle. The global economy is undergoing profound transformation. Artificial intelligence, digital technologies, and electrification are reshaping how we produce, work, and trade. If this transformation is not aligned with environmental protection, equity, and human dignity, we risk building a new high-tech economy on the old foundation of extraction, exclusion, and pollution.
Kenyan President William Ruto. Once again, the United States Congress has advanced a bill seeking to revive the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which expired on September 30 this year. The act was introduced by Jason Smith, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, who proposed a 3-year renewal until December 31st, 2028. And on Wednesday, the U.S. House Committee on Ways and Means passed the Extension Act by a vote of 37-3, showing strong bipartisan support before full House consideration. International trade expert Stephen Lander joins us now for the Explainer. Stephen is in Washington, D.C. It's great to see you, Stephen. Thank you for joining us on the program. Now, if I'm understanding this correctly, the approval to extend AGOA is not a unanimous agreement by Congress, but a committee in the Congress. What's the difference?
Okay, the congressional procedure usually is that a bill is first approved by a committee. As you know, we have two houses or two bodies in the U.S. Congress. All revenue bill, AGOA involves tariffs, begins in the House of Representatives. So step number one was completed very successfully with, as you pointed out, a 38-3 vote. So it is now reported out of the committee. The next step is for the bill to be passed by the House. We currently expect that to happen before the end of the month. That will get us to December. We then have to get approval of the bill in the Senate. That begins a committee, but there's no question there's support for that particular bill, and so on. The only question which is opened is the vehicle on which is passed. Usually you do not pass just a single bill like AGOA. You combine them with other bills, and there will be a bill voted on January 30th out of the U.S. Congress to fund the government. You may recall there was a shutdown of many agencies in the U.S. government a couple of months ago. And that particular shutdown was over when they passed a continuing resolution, and they have to pass that resolution again on January 30th because it expires. So the idea is to have the bill approved by the two Congresses, but not in terms of going into effect. Then you add it as an amendment to the continuing resolution, and it will be passed. So it's step one. But the situation is pretty smooth to assure its passage before before January 31st next year.
So still some time until, we can confidently say AGOA is back. Now, if Congress does get a unanimous approval, how certain are we this bill will be signed by the U.S. president, whose recent policies towards Africa do not show that he prioritizes relations with the continent?
Well, that's a long discussion about U.S.-African relations, which we might have in the future. My experience has been that the U.S. president talks tough, but he usually ends up in a very moderate position. Many of you may recall that when they originally announced, quote, the reciprocal duties on so-called Liberation Day, when the president issued his I love tariff thing, Africa was subject to very high duties. Lesotho had a 50% duty. Mauritius had a 40, Madagascar 47. Nigeria was in the 20s, if I recall correctly. However, when the bill it was implemented, taken away, and when the higher duties were finally implemented in July, beginning August, at that point, all the rates miraculously were either at 10 or at 15%. So don't listen always to the bulk, try to find out what's behind it and so on. The administration would like a 1-year renewal, not a 3-year renewal, because they want to put their own imprint on AGOA, make the program more reciprocal, perhaps include some different provisions. So the only difference between the administration now on AGOA and Congress, at least, is their public statement of 1 year. However, this is now a congressional process. So if it's passed for 3 years, I doubt very much that the president would veto it, particularly if it's part of a bigger bill, such as the continuing resolution, etc. So I don't know whether the renewal will be 1, 2, or 3 years, but I'm pretty sure when it's passed, it will be signed by the president.
Right. And if the AGOA Act is extended either by a year or by 3 years, what could change in the act under the Trump administration?
Well, now we go to what follows. And there are two things that at least I am focusing here in Washington. First, in addition to AGOA, the president put into effect what he called reciprocal duties on all imports from all countries. There's been a lot of exceptions made, both products, negotiating so-called reciprocal framework agreements with different countries, so far not with Africa. We would hope very much that a reciprocal framework agreement could be negotiated between a critical mass of African countries. We hope Nigeria would join that critical mass because you make the critical mass almost by yourself because you're so large, etc., and so on. And in that agreement, and this is pure Stephen Landy speculation, this is no way official or anything, but in that agreement, I foresee a trade-off where you will be exempted from the 15 and 10% duty or the 15% duty that impacts Nigeria. So everything will be back to duty-free if AGOA is also passed, in exchange for which we need a commitment that any country which happens to sign an economic partnership agreement with Europe. As you know, Nigeria is the only West African country that is opposed to signing that agreement. But if that agreement ever goes into effect, the U.S. must receive the same tariff treatment if we're providing duty-free treatment. And then we have to address the critical minerals question, because that's the highest priority of the administration, is to have free and fair access to critical minerals. And let me just make one other quick comment on that. The recent agreement between the U.S. and the Congo, the bilateral agreement, which would accompany their peace agreement, included some very balanced provisions on critical minerals. So we are suggesting that people look at that agreement, and if they decide to negotiate a reciprocal agreement with the U.S., that they consider using that particular provision as a basis. So the simple answer to your question is, we get AGOA renewed, let's say 3 years. We take care of the reciprocal duties now in place as well through a framework agreement. And then we have 2 or 3 years to work and improve AGOA. And we have some ideas in mind as well as to how to enhance AGOA. But that involves close work with your ministry and with your private sector to make sure there's an agreement on the enhancements we want to AGOA.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Stephen, thanks again.
I apologize. I apologize. I'm a professor and I talk too much, so I accept that. My wife, we're married 61 years, says I still talk too much, so I apologize for putting so much in one answer.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We'll just have to bring you back to help us really unpack what you have just said as we try to follow the discussion on AGOA. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
And thank you so much for having me. And just remember, we're passing AGOA. All the naysayers who said the U.S. is leaving Africa, tell them to go to that four-letter word. We are doing it, and we are in the war to fight against China. So don't write us off. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Stephen. Stephen Lander, international trade expert, joining us on the program. Now, South Africa's Border Management Authority officials have intercepted a group of illegal foreigners from Ethiopia and Bangladesh on arrival at the OR Tambo International Airport. According to the BMA, 14 Ethiopians were stopped upon arrival on Thursday while traveling on an Ethiopian Airlines flight. The 5 men and 9 women were flagged even before their plane touched down. Preliminary investigations suggest the group may not have fully consented to the journey, pointing to possible coercion by syndicates exploiting vulnerable people seeking better opportunities abroad. It also says 16 Bangladesh nationals were caught with fraudulent visas. They were spotted trying to blend in with South African passengers in the airport's arrivals terminal. They attempted to use lanes reserved for locals, a move that caught the attention of alert border enforcement officers. Behavioral profiling, a technique where officials observe body language, group dynamics, and other subtle cues, led to their removal from the queue for secondary inspections. During these checks, authorities discovered fraudulent visas in the Bangladeshis' possession. Their explanation for entering South Africa were inconsistent and did not align with legitimate travel purposes, such as tourism or business. And this raised strong suspicions of human trafficking involvement, where victims are often promised jobs or safety but end up arriving in exploitative situations. The U.S. mission in Nigeria remains committed to supporting the country's youth. That's assurance from Consul General Rick Swart at a reunion reception for the 2025 Mandela Washington Fellows in Lagos. Fellows who've been outstanding in their work were acknowledged and given awards. Mandela Washington Fellows from all walks of life in Nigeria. The venue for the reunion, residence of the U.S. Consul General Rick Swart in Ikoyi, Lagos. Amidst the squeals of delight at seeing each other after a long time and the handshakes and hugs, these fellows know they're here for a reason: to meet, to network, and possibly go home with an award. The Consul General reiterates the U.S. government's commitment to youth development in Nigeria and the recognition of fellows who have distinguished themselves in driving change.
As we gather tonight, we reaffirm the U.S. mission's commitment to supporting Nigerian youth through programs, partnerships, and exchanges that expand opportunity, strengthen leadership capacity, and deepen people-to-people ties. We believe in your ambitions, and we are committed to standing with you to shape the future as you shape the future of your communities and of your country.
The pleasantries aside, the awards begin to roll out.
Please, can we put our hands together for all our award recipients?
The awardees recall their projects that have stemmed from personal experiences and a desire to make the world a better place.
For me, it started after my National Youth Service. I was looking for a job, but one day I came across persons with disabilities in front of the National Stadium, and I was genuinely just interested in what was happening. I walked up to them, learned about some of the struggles they had, and I felt that, okay, I could leave my own search and see what I can do, and that was how it started. The organization is 11 years now, and that's what we've been doing.
When you follow your passion and do work in many communities like that, you do it because you want to see change. You don't do it for applause, you don't do it for awards, you don't do it for cash, you just do it because you really are desperate and hungry to see changes in people. This started in 2011 after I lost a close friend at childbirth. I am a lawyer by training. I run my own law firm, but I also have this passion to be able to help women access quality healthcare services, which is like an NGO setting and things like that. So yes, we work in different communities across Nigeria.
When young people put their mind to do something, there are some models, there are some leaders watching, and this is a testament that they are watching and they are rewarding.
The evening wears on with more networking and enjoying of the good food and drinks as more awards are doled out. Amarachi Ubani, Channels Television News.
Congratulations to all the recipients.
There is more clarity around taxation with the federal government's new tax regime set to begin on the 1st of January. CEO EasyPay Asha Adini says there is more specificity in terms of who and what around taxation. He was speaking on the sidelines of the Mandela Washington Fellows reunion.
And we're excited about the innovation that is coming in the tax space. For instance, it's beneficial to a lot of people, at least over 90% of Nigerians are going to get a lot of benefit from this tax. For instance, if you are earning 800,000 annually, you're not going to pay taxes. If your company is not making over 100 million naira, you're not going to pay company income tax. So there are very specific, defined ways to know, oh, am I supposed to pay tax? Am I not supposed to pay taxes? And just very definitive measures around taxation. And now we have a tax ombudsman that can sort out tax disputes between the company and the Nigeria Revenue Service, which is currently the FRS. So there's just a lot of clarity around taxation. I know a lot of people, where there are disputes, where there are concerns, a lot of us have raised it, and the government have shown listening ears, especially around capital gains tax. So the government has shown listening ears to a lot of things. You remember when the VAT was supposed to be increased, the government also showed listening ears. So, it's a good place to start.
A popular Ghanaian social media influencer known as Abu Trika, whose real name is Frederick Kumi, has been nabbed over allegations he orchestrated a romance scam that defrauded elderly Americans over $8 million. Prosecutors said he used AI tools to create fake online identities, targeting victims through social media and dating sites, earning their trust and then extorting their money. Kumi faces charges in the U.S. of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and a money laundering conspiracy. He faces up to 20 years in prison if found guilty. A 31-year-old was arrested in Ghana following a joint operation between the two countries, and the U.S. will now seek to extradite him. He has not yet commented on the allegations. Kumi, who is also known as Emmanuel Kojo Ba Obeng, flaunted luxury items online to his more than 100,000 Instagram followers. This raised suspicion about the sources of his income. Meanwhile, Ethiopian police have arrested a sixth popular TikTok creator days after 5 other influencers were detained over allegations of wearing indecent attire at a public event in the culturally conservative country. 22-year-old Adonai Behani is a lifestyle and motivational creator with close to 4 million followers who was named TikToker of the Year at the Ethiopia Creative Award 2025. The same ceremony now at the center of the controversy. Police said on Wednesday evening that he was under investigation. The detentions have ignited widespread debate across Ethiopian social media. Supporters argue the arrests violate freedom of expression and stifle creativity, while conservative voices have defended the police, insisting that public figures must respect cultural norms. And as we end the program, did you know that Ethiopia is one of the oldest countries in the world with a history that dates back to 400 BC? It's also the only African country never to have been colonized except for a brief Italian occupation during World War II. And now you know. That's Network Africa. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.